headline story: the cost of Nigeria's electricity challenges. Electricity generation started in Nigeria in 1896, and in the past several years, Nigeria's electricity generation and distribution have failed to meet the needs of Africa's most populous country. But that comes with cost. Recent data from the World Bank has once again highlighted the issues in Nigeria's electricity sector. We'll get into those issues today on the show. I'm Tolulokwe Adelaru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. The special advisor to Nigeria's president on infrastructure, Ahmad Rufai Zakari, has denied reports by the World Bank that said Nigeria spends a minimum of $1.5 billion to subsidize the country's electricity sector annually. The presidential aide added that the survey conducted by the international lender is not accurate in its summation that 78% of power consumers in Nigeria get less than 12 hours of electricity supply daily. Zachary further explained that the recently introduced service-based tariff, which increased electricity costs for end users, improved the liquidity in the markets by about 65 billion naira in January. Recently, the World Bank said that Nigeria has the largest number of people without access to electricity, adding that the sector has been recording a yearly revenue loss of about $29 billion. The Nigerian government maintains that it is unclear what empirical evidence the World Bank used to extract the figures, insisting that power distribution to consumers has been steadily improving. Joining me is Tunde Leye. He's a partner at SBM Intelligence. Now, SBM is Nigeria's leading geopolitical research consultancy. Tunde, thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Tolu.
All right, so let's start with a bit of a trip down memory lane, or rather history, we might say. Electricity generation started as far back in Nigeria in 1896. And in fact, Nigeria actually had electric streetlights before some cities in Europe. But from then till now, it is a different story. Why has Nigeria struggled to meet the demand over a century later?
As things continue to grow, we didn't plan to grow with it. And so as time went on, the demand outstripped the supply. And what the government will then do was, because these things became nationalized and the government could not keep up, the investments that needed to go into the sector did not go into the sector. Ultimately, it failed. However, there have been reforms, but you could say that the reforms have been half-hearted, right from even before the advent of democracy. The reforms had started. Obasanjo's regime accelerated it. Yar'Adua's regime reversed some of them. But what happened was that portions of the value chain were privatized, were liberalized, while other portions were left unliberalized, and those have become sort of bottlenecks. In addition, we have not allowed the market to determine the pricing of many things. So, for example, there's a multi-year tariff order that should cause the pricing of electricity to move in a graduated manner and not a shocking manner every year. What has happened is that we have not stuck with that, and so we now move prices in ways that create shocks, and many things are not cost reflective in the value chain, which has stifled investment. So it's a bunch of things.
Yeah.
The fact that we didn't plan, and then at the point where we tried to reform, the reform was half-hearted, and then at the times when people were supposed to make investments, those investments structurally are made unprofitable.
All right, and we're going to get into that on the issues of the multi-year tariff, as well as the true cost of electricity and if Nigerians can actually afford it. But let's get into the World Bank's data. Now, the bank has said that 1 in 10 people without access to electricity across the world now resides in Nigeria. It also said that 78% of power consumers get less than 12 hours of electricity a day. The government has pushed back on this, saying data from the NERC is that 55% of citizens connected to the grid are in tariff bands D and E, which are less than the 12 hours supply. And I know this is work that this is an area that SBM has dabbled into and done some research on. But in terms of the true electricity and the true power that is getting to Nigerians, what is the real picture as to how many Nigerians have how many hours of electricity a day?
Thank you very much, Tolu. I would think that the World Bank has probably understated the issue. Typically, when you do those kind of researches, you will err on the side of understating, on the side of caution, so that you are not overstating a problem. But I think that from all the indications that we have, from what we've done, it's probably worse. Hello,
Tunde? Okay, so I think we're having some technical issues there, but Tunde will be back with us as we continue this conversation. I think he might be back now. Hello, Tunde?
On top of the electricity.
Okay, some network issues coming on there. So we are having this conversation looking at the cost of Nigeria's electricity challenges.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Tunde, I can hear you now. I can hear you now. All right, continue. So we're looking at in terms of what really is the genuine picture when it comes to how many Nigerians have what amount of electricity. All right. Okay, so Tunde, let's do this. Let's take a quick timeout. Let's take a timeout on the show and make sure we settle what those issues are, because we also have to get into how much this situation continues to cost Nigeria annually, and it's estimated at $29 billion. That's what it costs Nigeria annually, or businesses in Nigeria annually, because they don't have electricity. What could that money do for Nigerians and for Nigerian businesses if it was going back in their pockets? That's going to be part of the conversation. Let's take a quick break. You are watching Business Edge. This is Business Edge on News Central, and we're looking at recent data released by the World Bank about what it costs Nigerians because there's not enough reliable and steady power supply. The cost of Nigeria's electricity challenges is the conversation we're having today. My guest, Tunde Leya, is a partner at SBM Intelligence, Nigeria's leading geopolitical research consultancy firm. So Tunde, let's move on from there. Let's look at the cost that the World Bank has put on it in terms of businesses. So the World Bank's practice manager for West and Central Africa Energy, Ashish Khanna, said that Nigeria not being able to keep up with demand is making businesses lose about $29 billion annually due to unreliable electricity. An average Nigerian consumes 4 times less energy than his counterparts in a typical lower middle income country. So it's easy to say $29 billion, but Tunde, let's try to break this down. How do these losses come about? How do companies or businesses across the country incur these losses up to this amount?
So we did a survey not a long time ago, just talking to business people about how their costs are stratified here. One of the biggest points is the fact that you have to go into incurring operational overheads to meet your electricity demand. That is lost income already, because that particular revenue should have gone into your bottom line, but it's not. In addition, people also forgo business hours because they don't want to carry the cost of generating alternative electricity. And that forgone business hours means that they lose business. That's also lost revenue. In addition, there's lost business that goes to other places because power is more stable. Power makes our business more uncompetitive than, essentially comparable economies. And so business that should have come to Nigeria goes to other places because it's just more competitive. All of these aggregated together is what makes what the World Bank refers to in that 29 billion. And we have seen this in our research up close when we speak to these individuals and we see people locking up at 5 p.m. who would have ordinarily operated until 9 p.m. But they don't want to run their generator and incur that extra cost. And so they prefer to lose the income than to incur extra cost. That's really the impact of this on a lot of people.
So let's flip that then. If this was money that was actually going back into the businesses, or was excess money also in the pockets of Nigerians, because even if they're closing shop early because they don't want to incur excess costs for running the generator, they're going to get home and run a generator in many instances across the country. So if this was flipped backwards and that excess money was going into the bottom line of the businesses and into the pockets of Nigerians, what could that mean for Nigeria's economy?
Absolutely. Nigeria's economy is suffering from slow growth at the moment, and it doesn't make sense that businesses are shutting down when they could be open and essentially contributing to the country's GDP. It doesn't make sense that people are foregoing revenue, are foregoing income, and are incurring expenses at the same time. You know, it's almost like you are losing on two ends. There's data that says that between 2013, when it began to be tracked, up until today, there have been about 140 grid collapses. That means on days when the grid just collapsed, there's no electricity anywhere in the country. To put it into context, that means there's a grid collapse on the average once every 20 days.
Wow.
You can imagine what that means for an economy, that once every 20 days on the average, you just don't have power powering that economy. That's a huge loss.
And when you mentioned this grid collapse, in recent times, let's say sometime, I think it was early April, late March, we had reports, of course, that about 6 or so sub-power stations across the country all had electricity, all had issues at the same time. And literally you have a situation where the darkness, the lack of electricity in Nigeria is costing the country. Let's add some more statistics to this. So according to the USAID, Nigeria generates around 12,522 megawatts of electricity, but distributes about 4,000 megawatts. This means that there is 1 megawatt for about 50,000 Nigerians. On the other hand, our neighbor, Ghana, generates 4,000 megawatts and distributes about 2,400 megawatts. That's about half of what they generate. Now, only 51% of installed capacity is available for generation. So we see that there are gaps. There are gaps in the generation, transmission, and we'll definitely get to distribution as well. But where are we able to plug these gaps? Are we able to identify? Earlier, you mentioned that some of these things have been liberalized. The distribution aspect of it has been liberalized, but generation and transmission still are literally in the hands of government. And it seems government is not able to handle that. So where is the gap in the pipeline before this electricity gets to the Nigerian consumer?
Right. I wanted to make a quick comment on that data. So Nigeria doesn't generate 12,000 megawatts. Nigeria has the capacity to generate 12,000 megawatts. We don't generate 12,000. We generate probably a little less than half of that. And then we distribute below that about the number that has been mentioned. So, of course, the first logical thing is to ramp up our installed capacity so that it starts generating. Shiroro, for example, has 600 megawatts installed, but probably about 350 of that is all that we generate. You know, and you can find that kind of situation across all the power plants in the country. The second thing is that on the generation side, about 85% of our installed capacity is gas-based. If you look at the gas master plan, there's a lot of gaps in that. In addition, the pricing of gas is capped in Nigeria by the government, and it's not cost reflective, which makes it very hard for the guys in that space to make the needed investments, you know. And that grid collapse had a lot to do with gas supply. There was a shortfall in gas supply. About 6 or 7 of the 8 power stations that were not available, but because they just weren't getting gas. And then some of them were having maintenance at the same time and all of that. So you see that gas is a crucial supply for power. However, we've not set up the gas value chain to be reflective of costs for all the participants in the value chain. It's actually more profitable for gas to just be exported than to be supplied to our power value chain today. That's it. So on the generation side, there's a lot of that needs to be done. The big bottleneck, though, in Nigeria is transmission. It's really transmission. That's the part that was not liberalized, that is still in the hands of the CCM. And I know there's been some recent attempts to overhaul the transmission grid. I don't know where that is at the moment, but that's really not going to solve the problem, because the government does not have the required resources to invest and upgrade that grid. It needs to be broken up and upgraded so that it can carry all of the generated power and distribute to the telcos, to the gencos, I apologize. To the discos.
To the discos.
I apologize, yes. So that's the biggest bottleneck in our power business. Of course, the discos have their own issues. They return power to the grid.
Yes.
They're inefficient in collection. They have not made smart meters available to most of the country. All of those are issues that need to be solved.
Okay, so Tunde, let me ask about this, the disco situation and the liberalization on that part of the pipeline. It was in 2013 that Nigeria privatized the electricity sector, the distribution aspect of it. Now, last year, government also increased the electricity tariff with a promise that there would be an improvement in supply and more metering of customers. But we've seen a situation, and that'll be coming up, where metering has not been fully achieved. As you said, the discos actually reject or return power to the Transmission Company of Nigeria. Inefficiency in terms of them, of course, getting their money back as well, even in following up with faults. In terms of the distribution aspect of this conversation, and I guess we'd say the success or lack thereof, what do you think has happened and what can be done to fix it? Because there have been issues with those who were given the licenses to become distribution companies. And many people have asked questions as to their experiences in these sectors and why certain people have a license and why certain people are distribution companies, and yet Nigerians are still facing a lack of electricity in their homes and businesses.
Okay, let me talk about what has worked, because there's been some initiatives that have worked. There are places in Lagos and other places, for example, that have done deals with the discos where you have essentially a commitment from the disco to supply a certain number of hours of electricity per day. And then those areas will pay
more
a premium, which is closer to make a commercially viable tariff. Right. And if you do a survey of those areas, you would find that they do get that power supply as long as they pay. And you find that the discos are up and doing. They respond on time. They fix their issues on time. They put a lot of effort into monitoring to make sure that people are not stealing power. So you find that things work when the economics are right.
But Tunde, let me interrupt. Let me interrupt because we have to wrap up. But I have to ask, I know these areas you're talking about, and you said they pay a premium. How many Nigerians can actually pay the true cost, a cost reflective, a market reflective, a competitive price for electricity as it is? Not many Nigerians, not many communities can do what these areas have done. So how do we then compromise between that situation that is allowing the discos to reap the benefits of putting in the work and a situation where there are not many communities or areas around the country that can do the same thing?
Right. But when we say many Nigerians, are unable to afford paying the reflective costs of electricity supply, you find that Nigerians carry that cost in generating alternative power for themselves. You buy fuel for your gen, you service the gen, or you have lost revenue and all of those things. When you aggregate those extra costs and you layer it on top of what they pay today, you find that their total cost of ownership of electric supply is already very close to the actual premiums that these areas are paying.
Okay.
What these areas have just done is to route their premiums to the discos and get better service. So we sort of need to educate people around this, that you are already paying close to what these guys charge considered as a premium today.
Okay, Tunde, I have to pause you here. I do apologize. I also want us to get into conversations about what's being spent for Nigeria's electricity. We can talk about the Mambila hydroelectric power plant that's been a project since the 70s. We can talk about the fact that in June 2020, the World Bank Board of Directors approved the power sector recovery operation of $750 million in International Development Association credits for Nigeria. We can talk about in July 2020, Siemens Nigeria also received approval from the government for the pre-engineering phase of an expansion of Nigeria's electricity capacity, and that also comes with a cost. But time does not allow us. But Tunde Leye, partner at SBM Intelligence, will definitely be having you back as we look at the solutions involved in solving Nigeria's electricity challenges. Thank you very much, Tunde.
Thanks for having me, Tolu.
All right, we'll see you again soon. All right, as we wrap things up, let's give you a few stories we are keeping our eyes on. But hold on to that electricity conversation because it's definitely one that we will continue. So the African Union plans to construct industrial parks that will enable the manufacturing of agricultural products as well as the supply chain. The AU Commission made this known during a forum it organized with the United Nations Food and Agricultural Fund recently, where it launched the framework to boost intra-African trade in agricultural products and services. The Central Bank of Nigeria injected $1.47 billion into the foreign exchange segment of the market as part of its efforts to stabilize the naira in January. According to figures from the Apex Bank, its January report said that foreign exchange market development, that this was a decrease of 47.4% and 64.0% from the level in the preceding month and the corresponding period of 2020. Zimbabwe has received $75 million from the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria to help it fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is coming from the information minister. She said that a post-cabinet briefing meeting that the fund is for 3 years from 2021 to 2023. Apart from China's donation of 400,000 vaccines to the country, Zimbabwe has also purchased over 1 million doses of the vaccine from the Asian country. And finally, the Central Bank of Kenya has invited bidders to reopen their bids for Kenya's 15-year Treasury bonds and new 25-year Treasury bonds, all worth a total of 30 billion Kenyan shillings. The purpose of the sale, which began on the 23rd of April and ends on the 4th of May, is to raise funds to support budgetary spending. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Head to our website, our YouTube channel, and also download our mobile app to take us with you wherever you go. Online, offline, and on the ground. We put Africa first. I'm Tolu Lokwe. Adileru Balogun. Have a great day.